We want to make a big impact socially in terms of in the world, whether that's defending our country through some DoD solution, or whether it's something we're actually about to work on right now, which is around sustainability and climate change.
Welcome to the Startup Defense. Today I have a new friend of mine, Pramod. You are at the confluence of a lot of hot button issues, a lot of hot tech that people are interested, AI, drones. We talk about sensors and autonomy and situational awareness, so many things. But before I just jump in and ruin this story, can you just tell the audience who you are, what you're doing, and what you're really passionate about right now?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Callye. So my name's Pramod, Mode for short, and I am really a technologist and a entrepreneur at heart. Like, combining the two is a huge passion, specifically with aerospace technologies. I think that aerospace technologies we're in the middle of a big revolution right now, both with, as you're describing, uncrewed systems, as we'll call a generic category, as well as what's happening with space and small satellites and even manned aviation. There's just so much going on. So my background is aerospace engineering. I'm a professional pilot, engineer, and an entrepreneur of 25 plus years. Interestingly enough, most of my other businesses were not aerospace related at all. They were more B2B services, some software, etc. So 6 years ago, we started Airgility, and I felt like really excited to be part of this revolution and to hopefully have a big impact into how we think about some of the things that we were going to talk about today around autonomy, AI, uncrewed aerial systems, or as we like to call the whole category, aerial robotics. We'll look forward to getting into that with you. And I'm really passionate about passing even some of that knowledge and some of that passion onto the next generation as well.
I love the new terms that are coming out. So uncrewed really puts a good beat on what we're talking about. And then the new just push to talk about autonomous missions, or there's terms around supplementary kind of combo teams of uncrewed and crewed, mission systems. And it's just gone such a far way from saying UAVs or UASs or drones, but what makes Airgility different than, the kid down the street that's flying around a DJI drone and has a headset on and having the time of his life? But like, what's the difference between that, which you can just go to Best Buy and purchase, and what you're doing?
Well, that's a great question, and exactly the kind of things we talk about all the time, because for some of your listeners who are doing startups, I'll start by addressing that to them, which is really have to differentiate yourselves. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten in front of an investor and they say exactly what you said. They were like, well, how are you different than the DJI I could buy at Costco or Best Buy or what have you, right? And it's huge. It is a huge difference. So I'll give you a little history. 3 years ago now, 4 years ago almost, we got an R&D contract with the Department of Homeland Security. And here's what they said. They said, we need somebody to develop robust technology that can fly anywhere, including GPS denied environments, and needs to be autonomous. And of course, the naysayers were, well, that sort of already exists. You could go buy a DJI drone. And they said, no, it doesn't, because it's not going to work like that. And not to mention, we want to be able to put different sensor payloads on. We don't want a commercial off the shelf. We need something that is modular. And so what we do at Airgility is we actually do all 3D printed drones. We are able to really do what I would call hot swappable types of sensor payloads, where we can plug and play essentially. All that, of course, comes with caveats. You still have to do an integration and things like that. But once that's done, now it's hot swappable. So those are some of the big differentiators. And the other thing, one other last feature I'll mention is something that what we consider very robotic in nature, which means if you are flying the drone and you lose communications with it, which does happen, by the way, and it happens especially in austere environments where it might be confined, complex, you might be in a tunnel, you might be in a building, things like that, you are going to lose communications. What happens to most drones, as we'll call them? They crash, they stop working. With ours, they continue to persist, even in that comms dark or comms degraded environment, communications degraded, which, by the way, which is where most of the military operates anyways, which is those types of situations. So those are the big differences. We can operate in all those environments.
That makes sense. We have plenty of friends working on counter UAV solutions, so we know some of those jamming issues and other potential issues that you can help mitigate. But easy way to describe this to people. And we recently had the opportunity to, pitch hand in hand. I pitched a couple hundred people what your product can do, and the easiest way to describe this is I can fly this down into an underground tunnel beyond line of sight. I could fly this through a forest at night and not worry about it crashing. So no communications, no visual guidance, and Airgility will work. And that seemed to just really grab people by the scruff and want to hear more, because we know so much about the jamming portion of this and what the mission parameters, what you can and can't do, what even with more robust or very funded startups that are out there, like Skydio or other people that are on that blue platform, they're not really bringing that autonomy that you're bringing to the world, right?
Correct. That's right. That's the big difference. We are, and in the first answer, I should have answered with, we are at this point at a level 4 autonomy. So for those of you in the audience that don't know what that means, there's essentially 5 levels of autonomy. Level 1 means almost like very, very minimal, like everything's manual. Level 5 on the other extreme is almost like, we'll say Terminator, if you've seen that movie, but we're not there. We're not anywhere near.
I was going to make the joke, but okay.
Yeah, so level 4 means the robot, in our case, a flying robot, is flying around. It can make decisions. It can do things on its own. You, as the operator, can still manually do whatever you need to do or want to do, but you've got amazing assistance from this robot to make it just very easy to go do the mission at hand or acquire the data that needs to be acquired.
Your business is firmly in the hard tech camp, and a lot of people that are listening to this and that I work with, they're in that hard tech camp as well. How do you get started? How do you get this idea and then go out there? And I know that you've got some contracts and you were able to get an SBIR as well, right? But can you talk about that process of jumping in and being a contractor, going after grants, getting that market validation and traction?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I think the journey is going to be a little bit different for most. But here in general, some of what we did and some of what I think works is, to identify a problem, right? To understand where there is a problem, and that, making sure that if you have a great idea, that there's actually a problem to solve as well. In our case, as I mentioned earlier, there was this problem of, hey, we would love to be able to use uncrewed systems for public safety in cities. So we were part of this DHS Smart Cities program where, UAVs or drones and UAS was just one component of it. There was many other pieces to it around sensors and things like that. But that was a component of it to be used for both security settings as well as search and rescue and public safety type of situations where I need to send something into a building, for example, and maybe there's lots of rubble everywhere and things like that. So I need this machine to be able to navigate around these things and do it safely before the first responders might even show up or have a chance to get in. And now in this example, okay, I see potentially there's somebody alive over there using the sensor I have on board, whether that's a thermal or what have you, or just visual. And let's send somebody over there first before they go somewhere else because we think, somebody's alive. So those were some real world type of use cases that were brought to us when we were exploring this with DHS. And so that's kind of how we sort of got started. And I would say, how do we find these things? Some of these things are, like, to some extent, are needles in a haystack, right? And so I always strongly believe, and what I would advise other founders as well, is to be very, very intentional in your business development process, meaning, network, get to the right, get in the right crowds if you can. And there's plenty of those. Sometimes picking and choosing that can be difficult, but I think you do have to experiment and get in there. The other thing is universities. Universities a lot of times work with states, and that's how we got some of our early grants. We worked with the state of Maryland through the university to get R&D grants so we could develop our technologies. So we were funded early on with some state and university money to essentially build what we were building, get some talent, because some of these grants that come from universities include grad students too, and you get to keep all your IP. The university is really interested in fostering R&D They're not interested in necessarily taking it away from you. And they're also interested in getting opportunities for their grad students to have actual industry problems to solve. So those are some of the approaches we took. We worked very closely with the University of Maryland in this case. At this point, we've worked with other universities. We've worked with the University of Missouri, Kansas City. We're starting to talk to Georgia Tech now with some things like that. So you mentioned SBIRs. We've done SBIRs. We've also done STTRs, which is essentially we'll call it cousin of SBIR, which is more tied to academic institutions, where SBIRs are just industry R&D contracts only.
Really, a lot of really great advice in there. And I want to just stress how often, particularly in the startup world, people are overlooking the power of your local academic system and the local support system that's around that. So Maryland is really a shining example. They kind of are unfairly good at this. University of Maryland, fantastic, but TEDCO, Maryland Momentum Fund, then of course Johns Hopkins, and I could go on and on and on. They've built a very good ecosystem to plug into world-class research in AI for sure, very leading research happening, medical as well, but also mechanical engineering, and I could go on and on and on. But I could also show that almost everywhere we see startups, there are students that are interested in working in startups, and there's professors that are interested in teaching those students and doing research with them. So very overlooked, undervalued resource working with colleges. And then even more undervalued is the STTR process. So commercializing technology. I'm going to talk to a local school here next week. I'm going to talk to the faculty about this because this might blow some people's minds in the audience, is that at that school, they are sitting on billions of dollars worth of uncommercialized research that's being done on equipment that you can't afford by people that you can't hire. And it is tested and proven and fairly credible. It's also just sitting there and they're not really sure what to do with it. So to go and engage the school, you can get access to literal world-class or cutting-edge technology for free or at an extremely low price relative to what it would take for you to replicate it and guess. You can just get the output of that, but build a relationship. It's phenomenal. It is absolutely phenomenal. And just a recurrent theme that we've heard from people in the programs that I mentor and then on this show is like, hey, I worked with X professor. We got this material science. We got this type of math. We got this learning model. And then when I go to commercial startups, it's like, I want to get out of school. I want to quit school. Hey, I'm right there with you, buddy. but also see what you can get out of these resources that are freely available to you. And then, bring them into the DoD market, please. I mean, that's what the purpose of this whole show is. But that's a really, really good point. I can't stress enough how powerful that technique is.
Thank you. Yeah. Speaking of TEDCO, we are a TEDCO portfolio company. They've been big supporters and a champion. And even in the university system, outside of some of these grants and things, there have been a lot of resources in terms of just the network itself, being able to, connect you to people and places and things that you might not have seen or have access to. So that also becomes part of what I would call an intentional business development effort of getting to know certain faculty and things like that. Not to mention that a lot of times these faculty, if they are bringing in research money from, wherever, right? It could be Air Force, could be Office of Naval Research, what have you. And in most cases, to accomplish some of that research and to do what they need to do, they do look for industry partners, right? And so kind of getting into the mix, getting to know those players and understanding what they are looking for is key. Again, it's just, finding a problem to solve. And hard tech is called hard tech for a reason. It is hard. So these resources that you're describing can be a huge benefit to get you past some of those hard things that you have to do.
What's next on the horizon for Airgility? I mean, you've got a great product. I know people are interested in it, but with startups, there's always this, what's the next gap? So I'm really curious to see what that next piece looks like for you.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So as you know, Kelly, the startup journey is one that can, it can be rocky, it can be up and down, and it can be hilly, and it's not necessarily a linear straight line at all. In fact, what we read in the TechCrunch or what have you, where somebody had some gigantic exit, rarely ever was it a straight line. That's like the really the unicorn, we'll call it in that context. But yeah, for us right now, it's really about sales acceleration, right? It's about, okay, we have a product, we found some product market fit, we need to get it in the right hands in the right places. That is no easy feat either. You've got to work with different partners and things like that to get it in the hands of those people. Not to mention that while when you're engineering something, it requires a lot of talent and skill, so too does that sales and marketing effort, and that can't be overlooked. So we're really right now trying to beef that up. We have some new sort of executives that we're talking to that I think, if they work with us, could be game changers. We have new partners that I think could be game changers as well. And so we're really excited about some of those opportunities. And on the business side, we're also, we're also looking for the right partners to potentially bring on strategic investment and or partner with in a bigger way. I think that, when you're a small company, especially in, we'll call deep tech space where it's emerging, you're on the front edge of, what you're doing. Adoption can be rocky too. You want to get in the early adopters, but you also want to see, more ubiquitous adoption, and that can take some time. So having strategic partners and strategic investment can lead you down that path. We have felt like we could have died like 6 or 7 or 8 or maybe 10 times at this point already. And I think we're starting to feel like we're getting past that now and getting into the hands of the right users, finding the right partners and the right distribution channels as well.
You're taking what works, honing it down, and looking to laterally replicate that, scale it up. I really like that what you said about the exit story that you hear of these big companies. I've worked with some, I haven't worked with the biggest companies on their rise, but I work with a lot of big companies. And behind the scenes, they're filled with people. That's the secret. There's no mythical heroes in there. It's filled with people. Their customers are people. And so when I have worked with entrepreneurs in that, that 8-9 figure exit, you see that story in their press release. I'm like, would have been nice to be at that company, but it all kind of smooths out in the end.
Right.
And it's for people that stick with it. And it's never, like you said, it's not like we won and then we won more and then we kept winning. It's more like we won and then we had to go figure out how to do it. And then we won too much and we had to hire a bunch of people, and some of those people weren't great, and that caused a lot of stress. And while we got traction, we didn't get enough customers because we were too focused on delivering on this other opportunity. And, so that's what reality looks like, but it's nice to hear it from another founder that I don't just have crazy experience, that this is, it's really is what to expect, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I will say is, especially in this world of deep tech, you won't just win, you will lose too. And it's like the Michael Jordan quote, right? I have missed more shots than I've made, right? The point is that he keeps taking the shots. And so same thing here. You might be going for sibbers and sitters and other things, whatever you're out there doing, and you'll probably get rejected quite a bit. The reality is you have to keep going. And a lot of times it has nothing to do with you or your solution. It could have been just what they wanted at the time. It could have been, strategic direction changed. We've seen this even on the commercial side, where a company will express great interest, and then, they'll say, well, we're not quite ready for that yet, right? And it's just too far advanced or something like that. And you're like, well, we just spent 6 months talking to you, and we never heard anything other than, being really high on this. And then suddenly some senior, and most of my experience, a lot of times it's some senior management sort of move that just changed everything, right? They don't even know you. They haven't even talked to you. They just have heard of this initiative. And that's the point. The point is, when you're doing deep tech and emerging tech, a lot of times it is new to organizations. So it has to be adopted as well. So you have to be able to roll with those punches and just keep going and keep trying. What we're finding now, and I'd say we are at an inflection point where we're seeing an adoption of autonomy, an adoption of using more AI, and being okay with that. right? I will tell you, even we talk to drone pilots that are what I would call traditional drone pilots that are like, hey, I'm a hotshot pilot and not everybody can do what I do. And then you sort of show them the autonomy and how you just leveled the playing field, that even Pramod can fly this drone. And then they kind of feel like they're not a hotshot pilot anymore. But there's a real ROI there. And that's where I would say senior leaders are starting to see that and say, okay, hey, there's an ROI here. We really should be taking a look at more autonomy. If nothing else, there's the ROI could be safety, and it could be pure dollars as well. And safety, of course, relates to dollars too.
I can definitely relate to new leadership coming in and a project not being their top priority anymore. They're bringing in their own set of top priorities, and that's shifting, moving away. But I will say that in the long run, the net of it is that relationships are undefeated. Right?
That's right.
You build a great relationship. That great person's not going and turning into smoke. They're going to go to another important place and another place. And we've gotten a lot of customers and clients because somebody moves to another organization or to another place on the organizational chart. But if we can build a relationship with somebody, we can stick with them across them going from X prime or Y prime or, what have you, post mission, whatever you want to describe it as. But definitely can relate to that, working on something for a year, 2 years, multiple years, and then it not being a priority anymore. But if you build a good product, there's other people with those needs too. Right?
Yeah. And that's the point. You keep going. You keep there. Not sales. If we kind of segue that into sales, it starts to become a numbers game, and you have to get the numbers. You have to get in front of people because there's going to be somebody that does want it. And if you actually have found product market fit, right, then there is going to be somebody that wants it.
How do you build an organization that's anti-fragile so you can kind of absorb some of those ups and downs?
Oh, gosh, that's a big question. I think part of it is, at the early onset of the hiring process and or the relationship process, even if you're not hiring at that time and you're getting to know somebody, is really exposing them to your core values of your company, right? Which is around, the kind of things that are important to you as a company. Like in our case, really resilience. And if you're doing any kind of startup, especially in emerging tech, there's a lot of ambiguity in what you do. And you're trying to figure it out, and you're talking to different clients and partners, and you're figuring it out, especially early on in that product market fit sort of cycle. You've got to have people that can roll with those punches of like, okay, we tried this, that didn't work. Now we're trying that. And looks like that's going to work. Let's go down that path, and having that. So I'd say we look for people that really embrace our core values, that have that mentality. We also are very clear at the outset, like, look, this is not some huge company where you're going to be given sort of one thing and you're going to go sit at your desk every day and do that. You might be doing 5 different things, and you might be running around the office. You might be in front of a client. Those are the kind of personalities we look for from I think you used anti-fragile, right? Or right. So the anti-fragility, we'll call it, personality that can bounce, can roll with punches. And could you make wrong hires? You certainly could. We've had people that appeared that way and sort of said all the right things. And then, as soon as one thing goes bad, you're wondering, well, what they're kind of cowering, On the other hand, we have some great people that are the exact opposite, and they roll with almost anything. And it's amazing. Right. And what I tell them, now that I'm, kind of been an entrepreneur for many years and kind of been around, I say, look, that personality, that resilience is going to serve you well, no matter what you do in the future, where you go, whoever hires you, if you're not with us forever, you're going to just do really well. And early in your career, you've had to deal with all this stuff. The other thing, you mentioned universities. We do hire quite a few young people from universities that start out as interns and then become full-time employees. So you've sort of tested them, and they've tested you already, like as an intern. They've already seen what's, under the hood. And hey, you know what? If they like it, they want to stick around. And we find that a lot of people do want to stick around because they find it so much more exciting than, say, go work for a big company. And nothing wrong with working for a big company, because we want to get big at some point too. But the point is that you're getting a ton of experience at a very early age, wearing multiple hats, doing different things, so that if and when you do go to that big company, or they grow with us and we become big, you're just going to be so much more adept at being able to adapt to things and being given different types of roles and responsibilities as well.
I love that you went for team in answering about being anti-fragile instead of IP or money or any of those pieces, because at the end of the day, the team is the business, especially when you're a
Yeah,
small team, right?
absolutely. I mean, our IP wouldn't be our IP without the team, quite frankly. Like, the IP that's been developed, right? It is all about what people have done together to accomplish something, and then that becomes IP, right? Which makes the company more valuable, which makes everybody more valuable as well.
Something that I pulled from what you said is a variation on things that I tell startup mentees is you have to go out and sell one person on the vision, the values, the mission of your business. You can't sell them on the big money. You can't compete against Google and Apple and Amazon, what they can pay. The big money isn't there. So the big mission has to fill in the gap. If you can't convince one person to join you in this crazy thing that you're going to do, it'll be really hard to convince customers. It'll be really hard to convince investors. But everybody wants to say, oh, I'll go get investors and then I'll hire this top tier talent. But top tier talent doesn't want to work unless they're sold on that mission either. So you don't really solve for that constraint. But to go out and say, I need to sell the big mission because the big money is going to come later.
A lot of that has to do with the vision that's laid out and the story that's told, right? So, and the story can't just be something made up. It has to be authentically, truly what you and your co-founders and team believe. Otherwise, it doesn't come through as authentic, right? And so, in using that, what you just said as an example, one of our sort of, I'll call rallying cries, or really what drives us, or wakes us up in the morning to really go forward and hit the every day really hard, is that we want to make a big impact socially in terms of in the world, whether that's defending our country through some DoD solution, or whether it's something we're actually about to work on right now, which is around sustainability and climate change and being able to. So our platform, we talked about a little earlier, is something that can go into vegetation, like you were describing, in the woods at night, for example, and map out the area and things like that. And so some of these types of missions that sound simple aren't so simple, and it requires some good technology to be able to do it efficiently, and then to get that data and then use that data in a useful way is also super important. Quite frankly, for this world of UAS or uncrewed systems, we're just scratching the surface for what could be done to have a big impact, whether that's saving the planet or defending the country. Those are the kind of things that drive us, or saving lives in like search and rescue, like we were talking about earlier too. Those are other things that really we think about and say, okay, these are things we want our technology to be able to do. Keep the people that are doing it as much as possible out of harm's way. So if it's a soldier, are we sending in a drone that can sweep a building on its own by itself, so that the soldier kind of knows what's going on inside before they have to breach the door, and they know what's on the other side? Yes. I mentioned the climate change. Are we able to use our platform to get into an environment that it's difficult to get into and get the useful data that can help maybe reverse some things that are damaging the planet? Absolutely. That's exciting. So those are just some examples.
You opened up a whole nother conversation about clean tech, because a huge portion of the other things that I do are clean tech, right? We work with the Department of Energy and do a number of programs through that. So let's not go into that today, but maybe in a few months you can come back. Sure. And we can talk about. I'm obsessed with this really simple idea: is that everything in clean tech, every single problem that we solve in clean tech, from storage to power to food, everything that's involved in that is directly a national security issue. I haven't found a single problem that doesn't directly translate into what we need to do. It's an amazing convergence. So let's leave that conversation for another time. But before we wrap up, can you leave us a piece of wisdom that you've learned taking this idea and taking it to market and taking it into this DoD market?
This is kind of a cliche, but it really does matter, is the persistence, right? I would assume that a lot of the audience here is, startups and companies or people that have ideas and things like that, or maybe they're further along and they're looking for some tidbits. But that persistence, especially in this, I can't tell you how much you need it in emerging tech or deep tech, because adoption, you might think you have the greatest things in sliced bread and you have lightning in a bottle, but not everybody thinks that or knows that. And you've got to get it out there. Just like we were talking at the beginning of the show, I get so many people that are like, well, Oh, you do drones. Oh, that's cool, but that's already played out, and it's so far, nowhere near being played out yet. There's still so much potential in the market space. So persistence. So you might think you're done, but something's right around the corner. So I would say that, and if you read like I do, a lot of reading of entrepreneurs, many thought about quitting, including myself, and then something comes around the corner, and you're like, gee, why did I even think about quitting? But you did, because you're human. So I'd say persistence, just sticking with it. That's not to say that if something's not working, you shouldn't try something else. I'm just saying that if you really do have something on your hands, just being persistent about how to figure out where that fits in the market is really what I'm saying. That product market fit is so important. That's the holy grail, is keep talking to people, keep talking to potential clients, keep talking to the buyers, go to where they are, whether it's a conference or an online meetup or what have you. Go to those places to learn of their problems. That's where you'll find that your persistence will pay off.
Thank you so much. And thank you for spending the time to be on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Callye. Exciting and fun to talk to you.
All right. We'll put all of your contact information in the description so people can follow what Airgility is up to. It's really exciting. One, the drone looks cool, but what it actually does is important and impactful. We'll be watching, and maybe you'll be the next unicorn, right? You'll be the next DoD unicorn. I'm rooting for you.